Yeah, just let me know when you're ready. I'll turn
Should
it. Yeah, let's get it. Actually, let's get this. I'll turn it this way for you. Okay, let me know when you're ready.
Ready.
Okay, there's a lot on this model that you can be asked about. A lot of things that you also already know about, especially with skeletal, where you have the body, you have the superior articulating facets.
Is it possible he'll test us on that stuff
It's
again?
possible he may ask you it in quizzes just to see if you've kept up with some of your old information. Now, as far as the nervous system goes, you have your spinal column here, where you have your white columns, you have your gray horns, so you have your dorsal horns, you have your posterior horns and your lateral horns, and sometimes they'll count 3 horns in these, so you'll have your lateral and you'll have your anterior or your ventral. Oftentimes it's just counted as your lateral horns is the large group and your posterior horns here. Now, these are going to be your dorsal root ganglia, these large bulges. And that's where your sensory information comes together, synapses, and sends the information through the rootlets into the dorsal horns, where it reads the sensory information. So your reflex arc is kind of going to go something like this. A sensory signal comes in, is processed in the dorsal root ganglia, sent through the rootlet into the dorsal horn, where it synapses with an interneuron, which will send a signal over here to a motor neuron. The motor neuron will come out through this rootlet and out through the spinal nerve to the muscle without passing through any other ganglions. Another signal will also come off the interneuron up through one of these white columns upwards into the brain, letting the brain know what happened. So that's your basic spinal reflex arc. In addition to that, you also have your layers of spinal meninges, just like the cranial meninges. They're the same layers. You have your dura mater, your arachnoid mater, and your pia mater. This thick white area around here. That thick white line is supposed to represent the pia mater. And around that here, this open space is the subarachnoid space filled with the CSF. So that line just on the inside is going to be the subarachnoid mater, whereas this line on the outside, they're separated by a thin gold line in the middle, but this thicker line on the outside is going to be your dura mater. And that's going to be connected through connective tissue through this and padded through these bursas and this adipose tissue that's also going to have all these blood vessels going through it. Right here through the middle you have the central canal, which is where the CSF goes down through the spinal column. Here you have your posterior sulcus, your anterior fissure. We already talked about the columns. You have your gray commissures, which connect these horns to each other through the middle, the anterior commissure and the posterior gray commissure. Now, after you get out these dorsal root ganglions, believe it or not, you also have your chain ganglia here, your sympathetic chain ganglia, or your paravertebral ganglia. So you can also see those on the model. He can also ask you about the communicantes, which go between and away from these spinal nerves. Now, all of this together coming out here, this is a spinal nerve. This whole thing is a spinal nerve. The dorsal root ganglia is part of the whole spinal nerve. So understand that when he's pointing here, it's the entire spinal nerve. And here are going to be your dorsal communicantes, your gray and your white communicantes. I actually don't think you can see the white ones on these models because there's supposed to be 2 at the back and 1 at the front. So I don't think you can see the white ones, but you're going to have your gray communicantes and etc. And then you're going to have, because this is a cervical vertebrae, you also have your vertebral arteries that come up. Those supply blood to your brain. That's important to understand for later, but I want to put that in perspective of this model to give you a better overall view. I think that's about everything on this model.
Okay.